So, the new Sandbox changes hit. So how do they feel? This is going to be a quick one, folks. We're still early on in this, so this is really just an initial impressions sort of deal. After big sandbox changes, generally it takes a while for people to settle into a new sandbox and to really see how the meta shifts, if it shifts at all. To start, pulse rifles do feel noticeably different, particularly on M&K, given that M&K specifically received a recoil nerf with pulses. You definitely have to work harder to control the recoil. That being said, pulses didn't get completely nuked either. As a whole, they're still perfectly serviceable, they just don't feel as dominant as they did previously. Now, as far as the DMT nerf goes, it definitely doesn't feel as sticky when firing from the hip at longer ranges, to be sure. At close to medium range, though, it's still very strong. Now, of course, the D2 community has a tendency to just drop weapons if they're nerfed at all without giving them a proper chance. But my main concern is that while you now may have to actually use your sights at long range with DMT, it still remains very strong at other ranges. The big thing that made DMT so broken was that it had no real weaknesses with its range. It was strong at long range, mid-range, and close range, and quite frankly, that does still seem to be the case. For my part at least, I've still run into plenty of DMT users thus far. Now, weapons as a whole do feel better in the air, but I wouldn't say they feel pre-AE good, yet at least. Particularly if you're using something that hurts it, such as Stompies. Overall, the AE system still just needs to go. It never should have been implemented in the first place, and it's really done nothing but hurt Destiny's gameplay experience as a whole. Now, Slide, on the other hand, feels substantially better, like way better, like better enough that Slide Shot probably just became very relevant again. The only downside to this is if you thought shotgun apes were annoying before, they're about to get even worse, yet again because of slide shot on various shotguns, so that is sort of a downside of this, but as a whole, I am definitely glad to see the slide nerf go away. Now, what about the ability changes? Well, to start, on Titans, the increased cooldown is noticeable, especially on overshield barricades. By the time your barricade expires, your barricade will only be around halfway recharged with an overshield barricade. The nerf was less noticeable on non-overshield barricades. At 100 resilience, you'll have another ready to go as soon as the first one expires. Now keep in mind, this is assuming your barricade is not broken by incoming fire, in which case, of course, the cooldown will probably be even more noticeable. As for Thruster and Hunter Dodge, the nerf isn't quite as noticeable. It's there, you can tell it is, but these abilities have by no means been nuked or anything like that. As far as those go, quite frankly, Thruster probably shouldn't have been nerfed at all. And for Dodge, Invis should have been hit specifically rather than Dodge as a whole, along with a nerf to Wormhusk specifically as well. The problem is that, quite frankly, this doesn't give people a reason to stop using Invis. Here's what I mean. If I were an Invis main and I saw this nerf, I would immediately just think, well, if Dodge is getting nerfed as a whole anyway, then I might as well just keep using Invis. Whereas if Invis specifically had been nerfed, but Dodge had been left alone on other classes, it might have given Invis mains a reason to try out other classes and thus more effectively reduced Invis spam. As it stands now, it's not noticeable enough with Invis to matter, particularly if you put on something like Frosties. Now, is this enough to shift the meta? Quite frankly, it's probably a little too early to tell. Whenever we have larger sandbox changes, generally it takes a few days for people to settle into them. I think usage of DMT and No Time to Explain will drop. Probably most pulse rifles in general, usage of them will drop as well. Whether it's because the nerf genuinely made them harder to use, or because the Destiny community has a tendency to just stop using anything that gets even slightly nerfed, is difficult to say. So, what will the next meta be? There are quite a few options here. With DMT getting nerfed, Jade Rabbit is in a good position to move up as the top contender for a long-range primary. It's an extremely easy weapon to use. Even though the damage perk on it is still a little buggy, the fact is Jade Rabbit is easy to use purely because, for whatever reason, it just seems to love to snag headshots. That is, of course, assuming we stay in a long-range meta. If we don't, then there are plenty of other options. Hand cannons, of course, have been the most common meta, so that's always a safe bet, but with the many other changes we've seen over the last year, maybe not a sure bet either. Sidearms and SMGs remain strong as well, and while autos are in a better place, they're still weak enough that it's unlikely we'll see an auto rifle meta anytime soon. As far as special weapons go, with the slide nerf being reversed, I think it's safe to say that shotguns may shoot to the top, but fusions of course remain a strong choice as they still outrange shotguns and are far more consistent. I think the Dead Messenger nerf will be enough to keep people away from it, but not necessarily other wave frames. Seems like Bungie just completely forgot about the existence of explosive personality with disruption break and threat detector or auto-loading holster. That weapon could become an issue very quickly for people still wanting to go the hot swap route. Now abilities are where things get a bit more interesting. Titan Barricades and Touch of Thunder Storm Grenades got hit with a nerf, along with Thruster for some reason again, as well as Hunter Dodge. One thing that didn't get hit though are Warlock Rifts. Those could potentially become the next big issue as far as ability spam goes. They're not as annoying as Barricade or Invis spam, but they're still a problem. Generally, it's not a good idea to challenge a Warlock in a healing rift unless you're close enough to effectively ape them, fusion them, have a clear line of sight with a sniper, or can smack them with a heavy weapon, ability, grenades, or a super, that sort of thing. For Hunters, while dodge was nerfed, grenades were not, and with Ahamkara's spine already being extremely potent, it wouldn't surprise me if their use just skyrocketed. Like I said above, I don't expect this nerf to really fix invis spam, but again, given that players will often just drop things in Destiny if they get tweaked, an Ahamkara spam meta may be even worse than an invis spam meta, since if you've played against someone using them, you already know that trip mine spam is just as annoying, if not worse. For Titans, I'd imagine they'll just replace Titans with Overshield Barricades, which really should have been nuked in a similar manner to Titans Barricades as well. So it's really hard to say. While we'll potentially see fewer Invis Hunters or Titans, the nerf wasn't so drastic that I think they'll really go away. A team of Titans in comp or trials spamming barricades will still be annoying, same goes for Invis Hunters, and again, Warlock healing rift spam could become the next big issue. This is to mention nothing of other abilities that could become a problem, such as potentially Warlocks with fusion nades and Starfire Protocol. Ability spam really became an issue when Void 3.0 dropped with Witch Cream, and while the steps taken with the recent update are nice, they're really still just a band-aid on what has become a sucking chest wound. So time will tell. We're still early into this update, and of course with Tuesday's events a lot of us didn't get to play at all, so we'll see what happens. The highlight of this really was the nerf to pulse rifles and DMT. We'll just have to see what slides into the meta next, if it changes much at all. But that's all for me today, Guardians. We'll definitely keep an eye on this as time goes on, but for now, if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.